we'll see if that work has fixed it. Okay, so the next plan of action is to put a ground lead from the battery down to the frame. Probably getting a new starter or an aftermarket starter that can handle more amps may fix the problem, but I've actually spent a little too much time and money on this vehicle. The most amazing thing about this starter motor problem is the fact that it works perfectly when it's off the engine. Okay, on further investigation, what I've found out is that this is not the ignition switch. This part here, that's the tumbler, and the ignition switch is actually down here, up around on top of the column there, and that's the actual switch. And all this does is control a rod that goes down to the ignition switch. When I turn this the tumbler, it does spring back, so it does seem to be nearly working, the ignition switch. Okay, this is a Ford starter solenoid, and we're going to rig this up and see if we can get rid of that constant cranking problem. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so for homework, there's this video here. And this is also a good video to watch. Okay, so what we're virtually in summary, what we're going to do is we're going to put the trigger wire here. And when I say the trigger wire, I mean the wire that runs to the starter solenoid that powers from your switch, that powers the connection and makes your starter work. So that's going to go to this terminal. I'm not going to use that terminal there. The main cable going to the starter from the battery and any other wires we're going to connect here. And the battery's here, and we're going to run a lead from the battery to here. So I think it's the alternator wire and the main cable from the battery. On this side I'm going to run the cable to the starter and a separate wire to the starter trigger wire here that comes from your ignition switch to make the starter go. So in summary, this wire here will come up and go here, and there'll be a wire running from the battery to here. This wire here will go to the S terminal here. This wire is the main battery cable wire, so there'll be a main battery cable wire here to the starter. And there will also be a cable running from here to the same place on the starter. Okay, well, congratulations for sticking it out and viewing until this part of the video. I believe I've found the problem. This is the first time I've ever done anything and has made any difference to the starter. I can crank it over, only just. But I can crank it over and it will stop cranking. It's wired up exactly how I said it'd be wired up at the start of today's video. It wouldn't crank over at all until I put the the ground cable. This is grounded on the solenoid. I did have it here on the frame, but when I connected it up to the battery itself, it fixed the problem. It did start cranking over at that time, and as we'll see, it will stop cranking, so I'll test that now. Okay, so at the moment we've got an elaborate array of electrical joins. However, basically the ground is the same ground that was there before, so that's grounded here to the frame holding the alternator. The other ground is the ground to the battery and to the solenoid. The alternator wire, the red one, bypasses the starter motor completely, and it goes down, and it's connecting at the moment to the solenoid, so the battery side of the solenoid. So that's the connection there from the alternator. So there's the positive terminal, there's the cable, and it's connecting with the cable at the battery side of the solenoid. So this side here flows to the starter, and this is the battery cable from the battery. So now we'll look at the switch or solenoid join that's here on the S terminal of the Ford remote starter, remote solenoid switch. So we're looking at the green, try and angle that right up under there. The green and yellow join to the switch runs down, and it joins here, and it goes up into the cab, and that connects to the tumbler where the key goes in. Then of course now we know the tumbler, where you turn the key, runs down to the ignition switch, which is located on top of the steering column, but still just up under the dash. And then that connects to the neutral safety switch. That comes down, that all comes down, and now it's connecting there, and it's going up to the Ford remote solenoid starter switch, and that's connecting to the small S terminal on that solenoid. So that solenoid switch there. Okay, now we'll look at the power supply to the starter. So we've got the cable going down to the main fixing point on the starter. Okay, and that's the blue cable there, and that's fixing to the starter motor solenoid on the big fixing point, or the big mounting point, or the biggest bolt and nut area. And we've also got, at the same time as we go to the starter, we go to the starter S or switch. Okay, so that's probably better seen at this angle. So we're doing two things at the power supply side of the Ford remote starter switch. We're also coming off there, going down, and you can see the red cable there. It goes to the brown cable, and that is going to the starter solenoid S switch location. So this is how it was originally wired up. So you've got the battery cable fixing to the big nut, big mounting point, and also the alternator wire fixing to the same mounting point. And this was the switch. The switch used to go to the solenoid, to the small mounting point there. Okay, this is the S terminal. When you turn the key, it goes through the ignition switch and neutral safety switch, and it supplies power to this point here, and we'll see that's the switch to make the actual motor run. Okay, the battery's a bit flat, but we'll turn it over and it works well. Okay, success. Okay, so we're going to call that a success. This bigger battery that I use on my other car, when I connected that, yeah, it was good to go. These test wires, the wire really wasn't strong enough to hold the current, and one of them actually burnt out. So when I connected them, or replaced them with the good gauge wire, yeah, it fires up real good. Hey, let's wrap this video up. This is a big success. So I'll just show the work, and then I'll explain the work, and we can close it up. Okay, so I'll explain every lead, and I'll get under the car and show also where the lead goes to the starter. So we'll do the ground wiring. We've got the solenoid. It's grounded to the battery with this this black cable. It's fairly strong, thick gauge. Also, the ground goes to the alternator. The two wires on the firewall there, that's the main power supply to the cab, and it comes around and goes straight to the battery side of the remote starter solenoid. And then we've got the battery cable going to the starter solenoid. The other wire is where you turn the key, and that goes to the switch side of the solenoid. The switch connects this side to the other side, and we've got two wires. One is going to the starter solenoid off-on switch down at the starter motor, and this is the power supply to the starter motor. Okay, the red lead is the switch on the solenoid, and the blue lead is the power supply that's put through once the switch activates is put through to the starter motor. Okay, the 27th of July, 27th of the 7th, 2018. So we see that the constant or run-on starter motor problem's fixed, so I'll just go and turn the key. So I've been starting it up the last couple of days and she's been, you know, 100%. So that is a fix.